Okay, so hello and welcome back to another Unity tutorial. In this one we're going to be making a notification pop-up system. So we're going to be making a Singleton class that we can call from anywhere to add a notification onto the UI, and then if we call it again from somewhere else, it'll add that one on, and then it fades out over time. And there's kind of two ways of doing this, so I'm going to do it this way, which is a bit simpler, and then if anyone wants the other method, which I'll mention in a second, then I'll do a separate video on that some other time if people ask in the comments, but otherwise I might not bother. So the way I'm going to do it is a text element will have its alpha set, and then we'll slowly fade that out over time with a coroutine. And then if another place calls to put a new message on, it'll actually get rid of the old message, replace it with the new one, and set the alpha back up. Otherwise, it'll just fade out and end. So let's say, for example, the reason you'd use this, and I use it in my game. I think I've got it open actually. So if I just drag this over here, what we have is, let's say I, for example, try and cast a spell that's on cooldown. It'll, tell you, oh, it's on cooldown, or finish cast channeling your other spell. And if I don't hit anything, it'll then fade out. But I can call that from anywhere. So let's say, for example, I want it to say, you can't fire with your bow if you have no arrows. Well, obviously then you're out of arrows when you start clicking. So you can add custom messages for anything you want, basically. And I'll show you how to go about handling this. So this will be quite simple compared to most things. So what we're going to need is, well, I'm going to thank my patrons first, actually. Thanks to Michael, Paul Robinson, Fulbaum, and Wesley for their donations on Patreon this month. If anyone else would like to help support, the link is in the description below. Now we can get into it. So this class here, Notification Manager, is going to sit on an object in the scene. I've done singletons before. They are scripts that there's only ever going to be one of. So it means you can call it from anywhere. You don't have to get references or find object of type. You know where it is. And it just means you can simply call it to do a job from anywhere, so it's very useful. So we're just going to write the singleton. I'm going to do it a bit more complex than I usually do it, and it's because I've seen different people do different methods for this, and I have started to favor this method. I saw Unity themselves do it in one of their demo projects, so I've got used to doing it this way now. So we're going to write public static, because that's the general thing, public static. Static meaning there's only one of it and it's where it is. It's never going to move. That's what static means in general, just in real life. And then public, obviously, access it from elsewhere. And it's a type notification manager instance. Okay. Now, for this to actually work, we need a private static notification manager instance. But the way I'm differing between these two is this is capital I and this is little I. So this is private, so when we try and get it from elsewhere, we're not actually going to get this, we're going to get this. But this, in turn, gets this, and I'll show you why in a second. That this basically runs some code when we try and refer to the instance to make sure it exists, and if it doesn't, we'll make it. So it's just a way of doing singletons. You'll get it in a second. So we're basically going to say the get part. So I've done getters and setters in a properties video a while back. So if basically this just means this code's going to get executed if we try and get this variable from elsewhere. So if I say notification manager.instance, then this code here will get ran. It won't return this. This doesn't really exist as such. This is what we're going to do. So what we're going to get, we're going to say if, and then instance with the little I, so this one that we've got stored. If that isn't null, so if it does exist, then we'll return it, and that's what they're going to get. And it lets you return that because it's the same type, notification manager. And then if it doesn't exist, we'll say instance is equal to find object of type notification manager. Now find object of type is not a good thing to overuse, but in small quantities it's okay to use it, especially like this. This is just going to be called once ever in your game, really, on startup, or when you start a scene, which will be part of the loading, really. So that you won't notice any lag with this. And the point is, if we don't have a reference, or so if we do have a reference, we'll just return that. If we don't, we'll try and find one, and then we'll check again if instance does not equal null, because what will happen is maybe we didn't have it stored, but it exists, so we'll just get it and set it, which will be fine, so return instance. But maybe it actually doesn't exist in the scene, so we don't have it stored, and when we try and find it, we also still can't find it. So this, if we get to this point in the execution, if we haven't returned yet, it means it definitely does not exist. So we'll create a new instance of the class, instance, and then we'll return instance, because by this point here, it has to exist, because we're going to return it if it already does. If it doesn't, we'll find it, and if that doesn't exist, we'll have to make it. So once we've made it, it has to exist. So this create new instance, we'll just, but here's a private static notification manager, because that's what it's going to give us. Create new instance, and this function is just going to say notification manager, and we'll just call it notification manager prefab, because we're going to make a prefab of this in the scene, in our asset, sorry, equals resources dot load notification manager. So that's the type we're going to look for. So it basically goes to our resources, which is just our assets folder, and filters it for all of type notification manager. So and then to actually get the one we're on about, we have to pass in a string for the name of it. So we'll just call it notification notification manager, we'll just call it. And then we can say instance, so the instance in the class here that we're referring to is equal to, and then we can instantiate it, so we can make that prefab in the scene. And then once, because we've instantiated it, it actually has a reference of the thing it instantiated, so we can store it. And then we can return it. And the reason why we're returning it as well as setting it is because at this point, if we just return it, I mean, technically, yeah, you don't actually have to have return here. If we made this public, it might be useful. We might want to call it somewhere, create a new instance, and get reference to it. So arguably, it doesn't have to be public, but we'll make it public for this. Now, that's done the whole setup. It's a bit longer than normal, but as you can see, it's got its advantages. And it's the way Unity does it, and if anyone's going to be trusted with Unity software, then I'd go with Unity, to be honest. If anyone's got any better solutions, apart from what I've already shown and what this is, then obviously feel free to suggest that in the comments below. The one thing we've got to do is we've got to actually make it exist on startup. So private void awake, if instance with big I does not equal this, so basically if it exists but it's not us, then we'll destroy ourselves, because it means we've got a duplicate basically. We don't want a duplicate. Okay, so now we can actually write the code for this specific notification manager. So what do we want? Well, we want a I'm going to use just text component, but I would recommend using Text Mesh Pro GUI, because Text Mesh Pro is just better, but I haven't imported it and I don't want to have to go through that now. So we'll just go with text, which means we need Unity Engine UI. There you go. Pop-up, notification text. A long word, well, kind of. And we'll also store a fade time, which is to let us just tweak how long it takes for the text to fade out when it comes on screen. We can just set that. And now we want a function that we can call from anywhere to actually just set it. So this function will take in a string. So public void set new notification. And I'll take in a string as a message. So somewhere else we can say notification manager.instance.set new notification, pass in our string. So you're out of arrows, or blah blah spell is on cooldown, or whatever the string is, we'll pass it in, and this is where it handles it. So we're gonna also need to store a private coroutine. So I enumerator, which means you need system.collections to use this coroutine. I've done coroutines plenty of times, so if you don't get these, then obviously go back and check. But if you know what it is, continue. So we're going to store that as I don't know, notification coroutine. Okay, so we've stored that. Well, we've got a variable that we can store it in when we do. This is just currently an empty variable of type enumerator. So we're going to say if notification coroutine does not equal null. So that'll be true. This will be true when a notification is currently fading out, when it's active. So if it is, then we want to stop coroutine. Which coroutine? The notification one. So if it's not null, stop it, which would then make it null. And because it's now null, we can set it. So notification coroutine is equal to, and then we'll have to make an actual coroutine to set it to. We'll call it fade out notification, and that'll need a string, so we'll pass the message through, which is this string here. And then once we've set that to this variable, we can then start it. So start coroutine, notification coroutine. No need to do the parameters there because it's just the name of a coroutine. here, which already has the parameters because we've passed it in when we set it. So that's all set up. We just need to make this coroutine. Now, it can be private because we're going to, call it through this public function. So it's a private coroutine. Fade out notification takes in a string message. And what do we do inside this function? Well, we basically want to set the text. So notification text dot text, because it's the string part, is equal to message. So that means that the notification in the game that we see, we're setting the text obviously to whatever we want it to say. And then we're going to store a float t. So I'm going to set that equal to 0. And this is just so that we can basically make it fade out the alpha over time, depending on a time we put in. So if we want it to take 5 seconds, this will make it take 5 seconds. So what we want to say is we want to say while t is less than fade time, which is the variable we've got up top, do this. Now, one thing you've always got to do when you're doing while loops, if you want it to take time over frames rather than just doing it instantly in one frame, is you've got to say yield return null. Because otherwise what will happen is it'll do all the code in one frame, and if you're changing the color in one frame, then it'll just go from visible to invisible instantly. The alpha will go from full to 0 in one frame. This lets it happen over time. And it's going to keep happening with this every frame. It's going to keep calling this code until t is not less than fade time anymore. So for t to not be less than it, we have to add to t somehow. So we're going to add. Now normally you would use time.delta time, and that's the time it took to do last frame, which is a way of consistently adding time. So in a 60 frames per second game, that will take 1 second to go up by 1. So if it's fade time of 5, it'll take 5 seconds to go up by 5. The problem is, in your game, you might change the timescale. For example, if you're in the menu, you might pause the game by setting the timescale to 0. And the problem is, delta time will stop on, or it will get affected by the timescale. So if you actually want a notification to be able to be used during the game being paused or in the menu, or you want it to happen in the menu, for example, you might want notification things over your UI in the menu. So what you'd want to do is we want to use unscaled delta time, and that means that it's consistently 60 1 second is 1 second, regardless of if the game's paused. It'll still keep going and going, so that's good. But what do we want to do every time we do this? We want to set the color of the pop-up text. Now the problem with the color of this notification text color is it'd be nice enough if we could just change the alpha value. So notification text.alpha, if we dot color, color.alpha. The problem is this alpha is read only, because if you try and set it to 10, for example, or not 10, if you try to set it to 0.5f, it's going to tell you you can't edit it because it's not a variable. So we actually have to set the color every single frame that we change this. So we want to set it equal to a new color, because a color is a struct. Now the color has an RGB and an A value. Now we want to tweak the A value but leave the RGB to be presumably red or blue or whatever color you want it to be. It'll stay the same color. So we're saying make the color, the R value be notification text.color.r, so that's the R value. Make the G value be notification text.color.rgb, so notification text.color.b. Now I'm just gonna spread this out here. So we've got RGB. And finally, you need an alpha value. So for our alpha, we want to use lerp. And I've done a video on lerping before, how you can use it to get between one thing and another thing in a set amount of time. So what we can do is we can say mathf.lerp between 1 and 0, because we're fading out. So we're going to go from an alpha of 1, so completely visible, to an alpha of 0, invisible. And we want it, the percentage between 0 and 1, 0 being 0% and 1 being 100%, to be t, which is this variable, over the fade time. So it could be, 1 over 5, which is 0.2. So it'd be a fifth of the way when we're 1 second out of 5, which makes sense. So, that works for any value. So if we just close that off, we now have this. Now you could put this in one line, but it uses up too much space. So I'm just going to leave that over a few lines, because I've put a comma, enter, comma, enter, comma, enter. It works basically. It's just, this is one kind of command as such. And then, that works. So once we've done this, it's just going to end the coroutine. It'll equal null again, and we do the check and stop and start. And this is actually it all in action, the code for the calling it and making it fade out. So now we just need another thing to test it, and then we'll be done actually. So if we let it compile, we actually need some UI quickly to test it on though. So let's just go UI text. It does say Text Mesh Pro is in this, but I think it'll ask you to import it. I mean, it doesn't take a second. I've already used, you know what? Nah, I've got time. We'll do it really quickly. So we'll go UI, Text Mesh Pro text, import the essentials. It'll take like a second. While it's doing that, I can actually go over here and say, using TM Pro, and we can go down, and we can just quickly change this text to a Text Mesh Pro UGUI. And the syntax is all the same, like .text and setting strings. It's just using a different thing. So we don't need the extras and examples for this. And nicely enough, we've got our text here. So if we just go to 2D view and zoom out, make this text a bit bigger, maybe put it in the middle, and scale it up, so middle, auto size. Maybe, add an outline to it so it's actually visible. And I'll bring this game screen across. Let's increase the max size. There we go, we've got some text for the notifications. So let's say actually we want this text to be red because it's, I don't know, maybe it's warning you. Like in my game I have it red because it's warning you. So maybe that text would be a bit smaller at the bottom of the screen. You get the point though, you put it wherever you want. Let's say that's the notification text. So we'll just call this notification text and notification manager. So on the canvas, which is going to be I don't know, scale of screen size 1920 by 1080, which is what I'm working in. So if we, I just clicked on something. We don't need a raycaster on this because it's just text that appears. So we've got a canvas, yep, it all works. Technically speaking, you might want to like sort your anchors out. So you might want, you might want it to be around here, for example, so that if you scaled to different aspect ratios, it would look about right. But anyway, we've got our text, sample text. The point is we want our alpha to be changing when we're doing this in the code. So what we can do is we can set the alpha to 0. We don't need to disable it. There's no need to set it active or not. We can just change the alpha. If we go back to here and add our script on to the canvas, it says we need a fade time and a script. So fade time might be 4 seconds, and the script is the thing on the child, sorry. Now, we've set this all up. We don't need to touch anything with this ever again. So what you can do is you can make your prefabs folder, and you can put the notification manager into the prefabs folder as a prefab. There you go. Now, the benefit to this is with the thing I added, when something tries to call the code, if it doesn't exist, it's actually going to spawn one of these in and use it, which is very useful. So what we can do is we can create an empty game object just somewhere, and we will reset that. Actually, let's give it not a rect transform. So test notification. This is just, I might spell that wrong, I'm not sure actually. Let's just let it compile. Test notification. All right. So we'll just say on the void start notification manager dot instance dot start what do I call it? Set new notification. This is a test, right? And then what I can do is I can go out of this, and now if I press play, this is a test and it fades out over 4 seconds. And obviously you can go and you can tweak this to be 2 seconds, apply it whatever to the prefab, press play, and then the text fades out. But then the thing is, right, you can call it from anywhere. So like maybe on here, I don't know, let's just quickly say private, we can just say in the update, let's say void update if time is greater than I don't know, 5, and then do this with a different message. This is just a really quick stupid way to get it to wait a few seconds and then do this. say this is nice to blah 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 blah. All right, that's our other notification, and we might also then just say after we've set that to a destroy game object, because otherwise it'll keep calling this. Whatever, it doesn't matter. This is just a stupid way to test it. Normally you'd have, you know, different systems where you try and do things and it does the pop-ups. So if I try again, as you can see, it should work. This is a test, it's fading out. And then after 5 seconds, it does that other message. And the point is you can keep doing it, right? And the benefit, or like the main, well, not main advantage, but let's say you go to another scene and you forgot something, I don't know, notification manager isn't in your game, right? Isn't in your scene. If I've done this right, it should actually spawn it in for us on the start. The object you want to instantiate is null. Or where is that? Did I not save it as notification manager? Is that the problem? Notification manager. I think I did that right. It's not the end of the world. Obviously, you should just have it in your scene anyway. I just thought that was a benefit. I'm probably missing something really simple, but I don't want to spend ages on that. Basically, have it in your scene, but there is a simple way. That should be able to load that from resources. I think I might have to put it in a resources folder. I might have messed that part up, but it doesn't matter. I'm not going to fiddle with that now. The video's done. I might actually do a video on that separately, like the new Singleton way of things. But anyway, yeah, if you like that video, then obviously leave a like and subscribe. It'd mean a lot. Join our Discord server. If you want a kind of more traditional notification thing where it like pops up with like a queue of things and they kind of some come in and go out, like so if you had too many notifications, it'll wait till the first ones have gone, then it'll add the new ones in. Obviously, feel free to ask and I'll be sure to do that some other time soon. But apart from that, thanks for watching and goodbye.